And welcome back to the show, folks. Hour number 2. And, of course, I don't know, should we run a countdown clock? Like they do sometimes before the president speaks, or what would they run? Oh, before the debt ceiling is reached, or before the government shutdown deadline for Jan Brewer to sign the bill or veto the bill on her desk in Arizona. Should we run a countdown clock, you think? Well, we're waiting for that signing, which, it's only Wednesday. She has till Friday, that we may not know for another 48 hours. A judge has struck down a same-sex marriage ban in the state of Texas. And here's an interesting note that we could talk about a little bit later on. 71, almost 72% of the babies aborted in Mississippi are black. Okay? And there's also news out of New York that just came closer the other day that showed in 2012 there were more abortions of black babies than live births in 2012 in New York City. So maybe that big, remember they put that big sign up, I don't know if you can see it on camera here, the most dangerous place for an African American is in the womb. Some pro-life group put this up once, and it caused, what a raucous, oh, it's racist. No, it's not. How's it racist? It's absolutely true. It's out. I mean, if you're an African American or any American, you should be outraged by this. But that's for another segment. Right now, we're going to talk a little health care.
The Steve Malzberg Show.
And joining us now is Larry Kudlow. You see him on CNBC's The Kudlow Report every night, and of course syndicated radio host. And I always get a kick, Larry, when I do the Saturday, which I do occasionally on WMAL in DC, 4 to 7 slot, and then you come on right after me. I love introducing you and saying, stay tuned for Larry Kudlow.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, so let's talk about Obamacare. I've been saying for weeks and months that the Republicans every day should trot out these people who are getting devastated by whether it's the premiums, the deductibles, or losing their cancer doctor, or their kids can't get into a special hospital. And today, Harry Reid called all of that lies. It's all lies, Harry Reid said on the floor of the Senate.
Yeah, what I really loved about that, first of all, they're not lies. They're real world. They're real world experiences. We've run some of them on our shows. You've run them. A lot of people have. Look, he blamed it on the Koch brothers.
Yeah.
He blamed it on the Koch brothers. He sees it, sees it as a huge conspiracy. And he really should read the papers more or talk to his staff more and get a better understanding of what a mess Obamacare is, which is why, Steve, I wrote a piece, and I said, let us have a 3-year Obamacare moratorium. Stop the insanity, call a time out, and let's go back and take a look at this whole thing and try to get it right, whether that means changing most of it, which is my hunch, or not. A 3-year moratorium ought to be the Republican message during this campaign, or at least one of them.
Right. Or I mean, instead of repeal, is there a difference in how they, for the phraseology?
Yeah. The reason I use the term moratorium is that I think there's a couple of things in Obamacare, a couple of principles that probably have to be saved, okay? One of them is taking care of sick people, all right? I think that the GOP needs to communicate that to the public, whether it's, existing conditions or not. There's got to be a way to take care of sick people. There's also got to be a way to have a safety net for poor people. I don't like the way Obamacare does it. I don't like Medicaid. I think Medicaid is a very poor service. But here's the deal. Look at the polls. About 55% of people want the thing changed, reformed, and about 38% want it repealed. I don't know that that issue is very important. What I'm saying is we have to stop the mandates, no more policy cancellations, no insurance bailouts, no taxes, no new regulations. Everybody is so confused and befuddled that this thing has thrown a wet blanket over the economy. There's no hiring going on. It's all part-time, and there's so much uncertainty. So the word moratorium means let's take anything we can that makes sense, okay? If some of that's from Obamacare, so be it. Most of it is not going to be from Obamacare, because you know what I want? I want health care freedom. I don't want mandates. Whatever consumers want is what they should be able to get, okay? It really boils down to catastrophic insurance. The insurance companies should produce whatever consumers want, not a bunch of intellectual eggheads from colleges who have never worked in the real world. But that's what I really want. I want complete health care freedom. That is the opposite of Obamacare, which is a government-run system.
Let me play devil's advocate here, Larry. If the Democrats get together and after reading your column, let's say the Republicans take you up and call for that, and the Democrats say, you know what, you're right. By April, they say, you're right, we made a mistake. Moratorium doesn't even have to pass Congress because Obama could just dictate it like he dictates everything else about that law. 3-year freeze, we're going to sit down and talk. Doesn't that put the Democrats in real good standing come November if they were to do that? I know they're not going to, but if they did, that takes Obamacare right off the table.
Well, you know, my hunch is politically there might be. By the way, a lot of Republicans have called me and on this because they're quite interested in this moratorium idea, this timeout idea. There's probably, Steve, a handful of Democrats who might actually sign on to this, okay, like a Mary Landrieu or a Begich, people like that, who are in so much trouble for going along with Obamacare and playing along with the president's falsehood. There might be, but most of them don't. Most of the Democrats, frankly, want single-payer, government-run insurance. So I don't think there's a great danger that the Democratic Party is going to embrace this. I'd like to see this as a big campaign issue. See, look, you've got a bunch of very smart Republican proposals out there. Senator Burr, Senator Coburn. You've got people like Steve Scalise and Tom Price in the House and Paul Ryan in the House. They've all got a lot of good ideas, but it's impossible to speak with one voice. They don't have the bully pulpit of the White House. What they could all unite on is this moratorium idea. Stop the madness. That's what I'm saying, okay? Look, every day practically, the president makes a change in the policy. Nobody right now knows what these are. There's been like 25 or 30 major changes.
Illegally, by the way.
Well, I think so. I think it's unlawful. I think it's unconstitutional. That's why this thing's got to be stopped and run through Congress again. There's a story today coming from my pal Grover Norquist, Americans for Tax Reform. The IRS warns Obamacare tax must be paid with tax return.
Yep.
All right. Guess what?
How do you know what? Who could figure out what to pay?
That's right. That's the key point. See, that's what I'm getting at. First of all, Obama himself, in one of these changes that he makes without consulting or getting a vote, has already said, if your policy was canceled, even though I called it substandard, I'll let you go back and redo the policy. You can get the policy and use the policy and not pay a tax penalty. Now, I don't know for how long. I think it's a year. But I know it's not March 31st anymore. People don't. How's the IRS going to collect when the president says we're not going to penalize you?
The ambiguity, I think, is purposeful. I think just create chaos, and this way they could do whatever they want and say, well, I said this, and oh, but he said that. Well, I don't care. I said this. I mean, look what our powers, the separate branches, the lawfulness. Look what it's turning into.
This is why we have to stop this. This is why I'm saying the moratorium idea works. And by the way, I stretched it out for 3 years. There's a couple of reasons for that.
Yeah.
First of all, it spans 2 elections. It spans the midterms and the presidential. So it's not necessarily going to 100% be politics. All right. I want the best brains to come back and work on this to help Americans. All right. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is businesses are not going to hire if it's just 1 year extension on, let's say, the employer-based mandates. I mean, for example, first they gave them a year. Obama gave them a year. Then he just upped the ante to a second year. All right. First of all, businesses may not necessarily believe it. And second of all, they make a commitment to hiring somebody, which may mean job training and so forth, at least 3 years. Talk to any CEO about that. They expect you to be around for 3 years, maybe 5 years. So what I'm saying is these 1 year willy-nilly extensions are causing more harm than good. Nobody understands them. Everybody is confused about them. And so we've got to stop this. We've just got to stop this. That's why I use the phrase moratorium.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I think it's a very interesting idea. Care to name any of the Republicans who have called you?
No, I'm going to leave that. But there's surprisingly to me a lot of interest in this, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see more of this, because the GOP in the House and the Senate are trying to come up with positions. And I say, you got a lot of smart guys out there like Paul Ryan, or let's take a Tom Price, or
but they can't coalesce around each other and get it done.
That's correct.
No, absolutely. All right, let me ask you about Harry Reid. Well, we'll get to Harry Reid in a second, but John Boehner today basically saying blah 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 when weighing in on Dave Camp, the House Ways and Means Committee chairman, who's leaving the Congress and is trying to push tax reform at this point. Which, you know, I'm almost glad to hear Boehner, although I'm not a fan of his, say blah 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 blah, because why interject this now at this time as an issue when you got the winning issue on the table going forward to November?
Well, okay, but you know what? There's the economic growth issue and the jobs issue. And I think, frankly, besides Obamacare, probably the best thing that we could do to reinvigorate this economy and get 4 or 5% growth instead of 2% is full-fledged tax reform. I mean, look, I'm a Reagan guy. I'm a Jack Kemp guy.
You worked for Reagan, yes.
And I did. And I believe that lowering marginal tax rates for individuals and businesses would be the single best thing we could do to stimulate and reignite growth and create new incentives for risk-taking. And that's why, although I think there are some issues with Dave Camp. Dave Camp's coming on our show tonight. He'll be on the Kudlow Report tonight. I'm very pleased. He's an old friend. There's some issues with what he's got. It ain't perfect, so far as I can tell, but there's also some great things. I mean, if you're talking about 10 and 25% basic personal rates, that is something that is pro-growth. If you're talking about a 25% corporate tax rate, that is something that is pro-growth. If you're talking about repatriating a couple of $1 trillion of American corporate profits overseas, bringing them back home, that is pro-growth. Anything we can do to get that stuff on the drawing board and get a national discussion, because let's face it, the White House and the Democrats don't want it. They want higher taxes. The president's on the campaign trail today talking about more infrastructure spending, okay, and higher taxes to pay for it. Democrats, including the president, have said, let's close loopholes, but he doesn't want to lower marginal tax rates.
Right.
In fact, would prefer to raise them on so-called rich people. So, no, I like the tax-cutting argument. I think supply-side economics worked. By the way, it worked for a Democrat years ago named John F. Kennedy, and it worked for a Republican, Ronald Reagan.
Yep.
It can work again. I'm disappointed. I'll be honest with you. I'm disappointed that Mitch McConnell and John Boehner are so lukewarm. McConnell came out against it yesterday, as far as I can tell. I think that's the wrong
And I think blah,
path.
blah, blah kind of is the same position.
You know, you got so many Republicans that I talk to want this kind of tax reform. And I know it's not necessarily an easy thing to do. But the basic building block here, we've learned this from the past, okay? Not big government spending, and reform the code and simplify it and get rid of the unnecessary cronyist type loopholes.
I couldn't agree with you until after November. And if we gain a lot in the Senate and all that, then bring it, then fight for it, make it a 216.
Oh, you're right. You're never going to pass it in 2014. But when the Republicans take the Senate, which I think they will,
then you could let the president veto it.
This is an agenda, and I think the GOP can signal these are positive approaches.
Right.
They can signal the electorate, look, we are going to have a moratorium on this crazy Obamacare and a total rewrite.
There you go.
Number one. Number two, we are going to create jobs and growth, which we have not had for all these years, with full-fledged tax reform. And then you could add, I want regulatory reform. I want to unleash the energy boom, which I think, is going to create a couple of million jobs at $80,000 a piece.
Hopefully.
So the GOP's got to have some positive pro-growth things on top of, in addition to Obamacare. It's not either or.
No, I got you. Larry, great to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And we'll watch Congressman Camp with Larry Kudlow tonight on CNBC, and going to be very interesting. All right, we have the panel coming up next. We'll talk about all of this with Peter Marisi, economist and professor at the University of Maryland, and John Fund will be here as well on the Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax Television.
The Steve